Patrick Phillips.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Looks fine. Is that all right?
Right here. These are all pretty much empty. One more here. One here. Get some college kids out of their seats.
Maybe a little tall. Yeah, there we go.
There's something over there.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. I have to also say thanks to Judith for a wonderful reading, and Mimi, it's wonderful to read with both of you, and thanks to Tom and Ginger for the invitation to come, which has brought me home again. I read, the last reading I gave was yesterday at my high school in Gainesville, which was bizarre and a place I hadn't been to in a long time. The students asked me what year I graduated, and this was the senior AP English class, and I said 1988, and they kind of giggled and said, that's the year we were born. And the other thing that was funny about the trip is how different it is coming back, is I read and then I visited a lot of classes and I talked a lot about poetry and the rather exotic career path of writing poems and writing books of poems. Not really for a living, I explained to them, but as a vocation. And when I was finished, somebody raised their hand very excitedly and I said, what would you like to know? And they said, how the hell did you get out of Gainesville? Which I understood incredibly well, but I also tried in vain to say something else about how difficult it is to get back once you do successfully get out. So it's a pleasure to come back. I'm going to read from my book, Chattahoochee, and I want to read, it kind of tells a story more than I knew when I was writing the book. I was just writing poem after poem, and then I realized suddenly I was telling the story of my family and a kind of epic struggle that went on, especially between my father and my brother. So I'm going to read a few poems that introduce you to the characters in the story, at least. This is called My Lovely Assistant, and the only reference that you need to know, I always wish I could have a fancy reference that you need to know something from the Aeneid or something from To a Nightingale, but the only thing you need to know is there was a show in the 70s called That's Incredible that had John Davidson as the host, and it was kind of a freak show. Precursor to reality TV. My Lovely Assistant. After the episode of That's Incredible, in which a whole family of Armenians in sequin shirts ate fire and spewed blue burning plumes, my brother tied a cotton ball to a bent coat hanger and dipped the end in gasoline. What made us who we are? One crazy, fearless, one always afraid. I stood by the ping pong table in our mother's only sparkly dress, playing the role of Patricia, lovely assistant, because he was bigger than me, and a master of the headlock, and threatened with his breath of snot and bubble gum and cigarettes, a vicious wedgie if I didn't. So I handed him the silver Zippo, not knowing what future waited for my brother, still thinking I could save him who hated being saved, who took my dare one night to lie on the yellow stripe of Browns Bridge Road and stayed there talking to himself, pointing to a satellite adrift among the stars while I begged him to get up, who sat in an upstairs bedroom giggling at the click of our father's .38, who loved the sting of the torch sizzling his spit-glazed tongue. So I kept one eye on the door, knowing from experience how it would end, how all things turned finally to anger in that house, where he leaned back shark-eyed and took a swig from the red gas can, the spitting image of our father in a rage. He stood between me and that pain. Knowingly, he raised the magic wand up to his lips. I sit and wonder what it means, my brother's sweet face bursting into flames. Some of the high school students really laughed at the end of that one, too. This is a nice, cheery poem. This continues the story in some ways, or maybe sets it up. This is called The Rules. And also went over well with the high school students, in that it went over with the high school students and not so well with the 4th and 5th graders, so that's a different story. They just look terrified. It was a really strange day. The rules. The first rule was that he made the rules. The second, we obeyed them. The worst rule was that rules changed unpredictably if he was losing. There was a rule that split us into teams, a rule about no starting over. According to the rules, our mother, forced to choose, always chose him. And though the game was nameless, we could have called it Abraham and Isaac. My brother hauled the wood, the flint, the knife, as our father made a bonfire of his anger. There was a rule about the firstborn son, the lone, unbroken one that saved me. I have to say, my mom and dad are here, but it gets better. They get their fair shake, because I'm a father now. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. So the poems about fatherhood are coming, and then they get the last laugh. But since I'm ragging on my dad, this is a poem called "My Father Playing Tennis," which I also read because some of his friends are here who will recognize my father playing tennis. This was the favorite one of the 4th and 5th graders. My father playing tennis strikes a figure somewhere between Australopithecus robustus, with its thick skull crest and massive gnashing jaw, and Homo habilis, that big-browed, tool-making, late Pleistocenian, wielding his racket like a fire-charred limb, eyes flashing, nostrils flaring as he stalks the little green ball. So in love with the chase, it must be a vestigial trait, coded in the deepest, most ancient folds of his cerebral cortex. A throwback to days when the small, furry thing darting just out of reach meant dinner. When the zeal with which he smashes easy volleys smack in the other guy's face meant survival. Raising his sweat-banded forearm, thick-boned and coated with black hair, like the silverback upland gorilla, he lofts the ball softly, cocks his arm, and then kills it. Grunting and spitting, arms flailing wildly as he charges the net, while in the far court I stand just like what I am, a furless, immature Homo sapiens sapiens, staring weak-kneed at what I came from. Thank you. All right, this is the last poem for you, Dad. This is, I don't know how this one went over in Gainesville at all. This is the story of my baptism, which I'm going to let the poem tell it for the most part, but around the time, my dad was a Methodist minister, now Unitarian, which should tell you a fair amount about the arc of his life. The apocryphal story this is based on is that at a certain point during a late-night poker game with other sort of pipe and cigar smoking, beer drinking, Harley riding ministers, it was discovered that my sister and I had never been baptized. Okay, baptism. So often have I heard it, I can name the poker players at the table. All dead now, but bald Fred Hall and famous Dan Vitale. Can see their cans of Pabst sweating rings into the wood, and smell in the first room I remember the sweet blue smoke of their cigars. Over the humming fridge, the clacking Kenmore dryer, I hear their chairs scrape the floor as they turn to face my father, standing by the kitchen sink in his long black robe, arms spread wide, blessing the basin of rusty county water. His thumbs hook into my armpits as he lifts me up near the glaring bulb for all to see. And in the silence, after I am touched, the third and final time, before he sets me down, I can hear him shouting, "Ghost," then the others whispering, "Amen." We went to the Andrew Wyeth exhibit at the High today, which I can highly recommend. It was wonderful, and one of the things that I was really struck by is that a lot of the what I thought were, or what you think of as landscapes, or especially still lifes and interior scenes in houses, Wyeth talked about them as portraits, and they're basically portraits of the people that he knew and loved, and he worked on the studies for them so long that eventually the people were erased. So they started with someone sitting there, and the more he worked on the studies, the more he realized that he didn't actually need the person in there to make a portrait of them. So I wrote a poem. I felt a real kinship with this in that I had written a poem that I want to read now that's an elegy to my father-in-law, who's someone I really loved, but who was this, I married someone from Cape Cod. So my father-in-law was this salty, in every way recognizable kind of character. Recognizable to me from Georgia, only have to change all the outer trappings. But man of few words, salty old guy from Cape Cod, from Woods Hole. And he died, and I wanted to write an elegy for him, but he's the kind of guy who would have absolutely hated to have someone read an elegy for him. So it was a difficult poem to write without dishonoring that. And so I ended up trying at least to do some of what Wyeth did, which is paint it entirely with things. So this is called "In the Museum of Your Last Day." And the title's going to go right into it. In the museum of your last day, there is a coat on a coat hook in a hall. Work gloves in the pockets, pliers and bent nails. There is a case of Quaker State for the Ford, 2 cans of spray paint in a crisp brown bag, a mug on a book by the Hi-Fi, a disc that starts on its own, Boccherini. There is a dent in the soap the shape of your thumb, a swirl in the glass when it fogs, and a gray hair that twines through the tines of a little black comb. There is a watch laid smooth on a wallet and pairs of your shoes everywhere. A phone no one answers, a note that says Friday, your voice on the tape talking softly. I'm going to do another thing. I feel like I should almost scan the audience, because this is about someone from Gainesville. And some people in here know it, and that's all right, but some people might know him, and then it really would be a problem, depending on who those people are. But I'm going to go ahead anyway. It's about my friend Nathaniel. And this is how careful I am. The surnames have been changed to protect the innocent. Nathaniel. I need a drink of this. 1 second. Nathaniel. Whatever it was that made the Reverend Barker stoop that way, it meant no matter how much he screamed at my friend Nathaniel for being late, for not raking the leaves or for raking the goddamn leaves the wrong goddamn way. His huge gin blossom jowls quivering with rage. His great whale eyes lost in the gray depths of his brow. He could only ever scowl at the tops of his wingtip shoes, or at the cuffs of the black wool suit he always seemed to be wearing when he'd thunder into the yard, or down the stairs, or through the little speaker of some payphone we huddled around. God damn it, Nathaniel, I told you. I told you, Nathaniel, God damn it. His fury repeating itself so precisely it became a joke. We hollered through the halls, changing my friend's name to God damn it, Nathaniel. As in, where the hell's God damn it, Nathaniel? I told you, God damn it, go get me a Coke. Which was stupid but funny at 14, and still just as stupidly funny at 19. When we'd yell across a bonfire, don't bogart that joint, God damn it, Nathaniel. Haven't I told you to pass the bong when you're through? Which is still funny to me even now, even though I look back and can see, as I could not have seen then, that the Reverend Barker only stooped that way because he was dying, because cancer was eating his liver, and because with each day it became both more urgent and more unlikely that he would ever manage to say whatever it was he meant when he'd sit at the kitchen table or grip the black phone or stand in the darkened driveway after we'd all gone home, staring at his shoes and saying nothing to his sweet, beloved boy, but God damn it, Nathaniel, listen to me. Listen, God damn it. God damn it, Nathaniel, now listen. This is where the worm turns as far as parenthood, I'm afraid, in that I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, so I wrote the whole book very much thinking about the experience of boyhood and childhood from the perspective of a child, and then I had the very amazing and indescribable but also slightly terrifying experience of having kids of my own and having them run around in the world the way they're doing now, wherever, far away from you. So this is a poem I wrote about that. Actually, I'm going to read a different one first. This is a poem on the same subject. And I'll read this for my mom, because the book is, my dad stars in the book, but she's all through it too, just as in life, a little less conspicuously. This is called Fever. These are newer poems, not in the book. Fever. It is the year the sky reminds us some mistakes cannot be mended. The year, dim-eyed and listless, a fever came to kill him. Imperceptibly, the windows creaked towards the floor, the black bay widening with the squall. It is the night the lights on the far shore hurtle backwards. The drugstore, the hospital, the sleeping doctors all dissolving in the roar. I want to ask the sky, who died and made me king? But the ants of death keep crawling from his mouth. 3 times I filled the tub and 3 times dipped him burning in the water. Not because it helps, or because I know what I am doing, but because the fathers and the mothers whose job it is to save us are all frail or far away or gone forever to their graves. It is the hour of nothingness, of that lamplit silence in which sleep alone has the power to bring my mother back. A blue boy in her arms as she whispers, Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy on us. This is a poem I have to read because the title has Lake Lanier. It's called My Brother on Lake Lanier. And as you've already seen, to say he was an accident-prone boy doesn't quite get at it. And some of the students yesterday, who are all the age that my brother is in these poems, were asking what was going on with that. And I don't really know, but at least in my mind, some of it had to do with the way that tendency became an emblem of something else that was going on inside, the way that it came out in the form of some of the violent things that happened when we were kids. My brother on Lake Lanier. Because it is my turn to ski, and because I'm lazy and don't kill the engine, though I know I should, as my brother swims toward the boat. And because our father's Evinrude is temperamental and hasn't been tuned in years, my brother, floating with one hand on the little ladder, fiddling with the rope, doesn't hear the gearbox slipping out of neutral, or the drive shaft clunking below the water, engaging the propeller that has drifted to within inches of his knee, through which the churning blades pass so easily that all he feels is a sudden thump that he thinks must be the last rung of the ladder, until he hears me shrieking and sees a circle the color of motor oil spreading out around his body, then around the drifting boat, and then as far as we can see. I'm going to read 2 more poems. They're both prayers in a way, or as close as a sort of heathen unbeliever, I'm afraid, gets to it. The first one begins with a quote from Francis Bacon, who wrote, this is also about the experience of parenthood. Francis Bacon wrote, "He that hath wife and children hath given hostages to fortune." And the poem picks up on that. It's called To Fortune. O my black providence, O my as yet unimagined pestilence of wind, of flood, of fire, of whatever it is you choose, by whose grace or whim we live. Unfork your tongues of phosphorescence from the frayed wires in my wall. Relent, O litany of all that's to be lost inside the whispering oven. From your endless work, rest long enough, at least, to listen to my prayer, and for no reason, as you do all things. Believe me when I swear, O coiled worms of darkness, O bullets in the oily chambers of forgotten guns, I have no sleeping wife with golden hair, no blue, soft, moonlit sun. And the last one is called Heaven. And it's the only definition I've got so far for heaven. It's very short, so don't blink or you'll miss it. Heaven. It will be the past, and we'll live there together. Not as it was to live, but as it is remembered. It will be the past. We'll all go back together. Everyone we ever loved and lost and must remember. It will be the past, and it will last forever. Thank you.